tough text this week. Luke tells us this story where people are walking along with Jesus as they normally did, and he turns to them and begins to teach. He doesn't give them a very easy word. He basically says, whoever doesn't hate your parents, hate your children, hate your spouse, pretty much anyone in your life, you cannot follow him. To give up everything you have, to carry a cross, he says, is what it means to follow him. It's a hard text. To be honest with you, this was last week's lectionary text, but I was nice to the bishop, and I gave him this week's lectionary text because I figured he didn't want to talk about hating parents whenever he came. And I kind of regret it now because what a difficult text. Hate your parents? Hate your family? Hate pretty much everything we work for in life? Is this what it means to follow Jesus? I thought this week about love and hate and how we tend to use those two words. I thought about things that I love. Besides the obvious things, family and friends and, all that kind of stuff. Like, what are some unique things that I love? Think about yours. Like, what are unique things to you that you love? For example, I love sports. Almost to an abnormal level. I love sports. I'm a seasonal guy. I don't really, I'm not prejudiced. I'll move from baseball into football, into basketball, whatever the season is. I love sports. It's a great outlet. I love sports because I don't think about church at all when I'm watching sports. It's really wonderful rest. Other things that I love, it sounds silly. I love doing the daily crossword puzzle in the newspaper. Now, I don't finish them most days, but boy, it's an A+ day if I do finish that crossword. But for whatever reason, part of my morning routine, after I read scripture and pray and do other things, is I try to make room, usually after I take the kids to school, to just get a beginning of the crossword puzzle. I tell my wife that we need to keep this going. That's going to keep me from, being senile when I'm older one day, hopefully, because I work my brain every day, but I love that crossword puzzle. Silliest thing. In fact, I love the daily newspaper. I didn't know how much I loved it. I'm a digital guy and everything else in life, but there's something about the routine of going downstairs, getting the newspaper, and bringing that physical paper back home, Even if all I do to read the paper is just kind of skim the headlines of the day. There's something that I just love about that. What are little things that you love in your life? There are things that I hate too, like very unique things. I have small children, so I'm going to tell you, if you've had small children in your house, I hate pretty much any sharp, hard toy that's about that big. And they don't come one at a time. Like anything this big usually comes in a pack of 500 of them. And they never stay together. They're always randomly around the house, like little landmines that always when you're barefoot, you just find it, usually in the dark. I hate small, sharp toys and stepping on them. Just can't stand it. Other things, I confess, and people make fun of me, I hate avocados. Now, some of you in the room, please don't lecture me about how good guacamole is and how your guacamole is the greatest guacamole there's ever been. I'm not buying it, okay? It feels like I'm eating Play-Doh, okay? I can't stand avocados, and I know I'm weird. I've told my children I'm allergic to them, and that's why I don't eat them. We all do that, right? Like the food you hate, I'm allergic to that. I can't stand avocados. We all have things in life that we love and that we hate, don't we? But Jesus has got a new level. Hate the very things we're called to love? What does he mean by that? Well, I have good news and maybe not as good news for you. Luke, it turns out, one of Luke's writing strategies, one of the hallmarks of the Gospel of Luke in his writing is that he does often write in hyperbole to make a point. That Jesus speaks in hyperbole because the big way of speaking drives home a larger point. Also, the word hate, especially in the Jewish tradition at that time, doesn't have the emotional connotations that we tend to have. Like to hate means for us, we say, I hate that. Well, all these feelings come up. But in Jesus' day and age, the notion of hating something meant that you ranked something ahead of it. It's not that you have this distaste for it, it's that it wasn't as important in your life. But still, it's a challenging word. We're called to do things like put family first, right? But Jesus says, nope. Your faith should be first in your life, even ahead of the things you love most dearly. We are called to love Jesus more. One commentator I came across this week said, it may not be that we hate things with that emotional sense, but Jesus is very clear that the lesson here is you need to know what it costs to be a disciple. Everything. Everything. One of the great gifts I'm convinced of is that we live in a day and age now where going to church is not necessarily the social norm. I mean, maybe in communities like Savannah, it's a little bit more normal. There's some communities that, church attendance is just, way low compared to the average attendance. But still, many of your friends, I'm sure, don't go to church every week, if at all. I was telling a group beforehand, we got this next step in discipleship thing we're starting and group gathering. And I said, that's one of the great gifts we have is that when you come to church, you mean to come here. You're not just coming here because it's, the thing we just do. You have a purpose behind it. Jesus says it's about prioritization in your life. Where does he rank for you? It's helpful, and I challenge you to go back home and read, but just before verse 25, the passage, Jesus tells a story about a guy who throws a great banquet, and he invites all of his friends to come to the banquet, and one by one they have excuses that they just can't make it this time. One guy, I've got this new land, and I can't come, or another guy, I've got these new oxen, I need to test them out, I can't come to the banquet. Another one says, I'm just married, I can't come to the banquet. To which then, he tells them to go out and invite the poor and everybody, who really wants to be a part of a great banquet. It's a great story to kind of link with what we have about where Jesus ranks in our life. I mean, think about it in our terms. Great banquets being thrown, and come, be a part of it. The great table of God. Well, Lord, I got this new property, and I'm having some fun renovating it, and fixer-upper kind of thing, and I really need to spend a little more time working on my property. Come to the great banquet. Well, I've got this new car. I really want to take it out on 16, see how fast it can go, and I just love the feel of it. Maybe next time. I really need to break my new car in. Come to the great banquet, the invitation goes. Well, Lord, see, I'm newly married, and honeymoons, and maybe later. But it's a question of where your faith ranks in your life. Where Jesus ranks in your priorities. Where does he rank for you? You're going to hear over the course of this series, the bishop did a nice job last week of kind of introducing it, but we're going to spend a good number of weeks, all the way up until almost Thanksgiving, talking about this notion of the anatomy of a disciple. The bishop in a former life wanted to go to medical school, and so he really geeked out when I gave the whole anatomy thing. You heard him last week. But anatomy is this unpacking, this getting into what does it look like. And he did a nice job. I loved how he said, each of us are unique individuals. We all look different. We all, in different heights, different weights, different hair color, all this stuff. But when you open us up, humans are humans. And I think in many ways, the same is true for a disciple. We all have individual journeys that we live discipleship out, that we live our faith out. But if you open it up, it's often a lot of the same values, a lot of the same characteristics. And this week we kind of begin with the big picture that says our faith is more than just something that, it's a passing hobby. Or, I might go to church this week. Or, I agree with everything Jesus has to say. No. For a disciple, for one who professes to follow Jesus, faith is a way of life. It is what shapes everything you do. It is what informs the way you love your family and all these wonderful things. It is what shapes the way you interact with others. It's the way you approach your job. It's the way you approach daily life. I'm convinced that faith is best lived out for most of us, not in those big, events or like fork in the road moments that we all have in life, but the biggest challenge to our faith is the daily mundane routine. I read an article a couple years ago, NPR, article called "Always Go to the Funeral." It's a great article. But in it is this haunting quote that something along the lines of, the author says that he finds that the notion of doing good is not about doing good versus evil, but it's about choosing to do good instead of doing nothing. You understand that? Most of us can avoid evil in our daily lives. I mean, most of us in the room at least are not, serial killers or going to go rob a bank. But the question of our faith is, are we going to approach every day with purpose and intent? Or are we just going to do nothing? Float through the day. Go through the motions. Will we begin every day with the intent that I will live this day for Jesus? I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I had the great gift of podcast that Molly and I do together, and we got to interview Reverend Adam Hamilton. He's a pastor of Church of the Resurrection, who I'm going out to his church for this big conference. Largest United Methodist church in America, 25,000 members. It's just incredible. And I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I tried to pick Adam's brain, for life hacks. What do you do, Adam? You write books and you speak and you lead the largest Methodist church in America. Like, what's your daily routine like? And I was wanting him to give me step-by-step life hacks for how I can be more productive. And instead, he goes on and tells me all about his prayer life. But one that stuck with me is actually something I've tried to do daily. He said, every day, Ben, I wake up and I give my life to Christ. Now for him, that means getting on his knees and praying. That when he wakes up and kind of, gets the sleep out of his eyes and he gives his life to Christ. Now, I know that's a churchy thing to say, but I'm going to tell you, I've been trying this in my daily Bible reading, and I journal. I love journaling. It's really a good practice. But I try to start every morning by writing some variation of a prayer that says, Lord, today I give my life to you. Everything that I have, everything that I am, I want you to have. Again, that's a real churchy thing to say and try, but I'm going to tell you something. I have noticed that I think differently during the day. I react differently during the day. There is something about that practice and the great mystery of faith that I don't know how to really explain it, except it just opens you up to be mindful. To put Christ first in your life is to be mindful that everything we do is an outpouring of the grace that Christ gives us. I'd encourage you to find a way to practice that every morning on your drive to work, on your morning exercise, sipping that first cup of coffee in the morning. I don't know. Just a simple prayer. Lord, I give my life to you today. Guide me as you will. Here's the thing about discipleship. It's not about programs. It's not about getting you to go to studies and be a part of 6 weeks of this and 8 weeks of that and, all this other stuff, although that could help you grow. But our goal as a church is to grow in our discipleship. We have this great task force that put together these wonderful statements that we spent months on this, that are kind of an outpouring of what discipleship looks like. Like we said, for example, our vision as a church, our ultimate goal, our future that we want to live into is that we want to build a diverse and inclusive community of people who live and love like Jesus. That's a pretty lofty goal, to be a diverse and inclusive community of people who live and love like Jesus. So if we're going to do that as a church, we said, well, we got to have a strategy. How are we going to get there? How are we going to guide people there? Well, our statement of that, our strategy is that we want to create a space where people can belong and become deeper disciples of Jesus. So we say, okay, now every ministry we do, every program we offer, how does it offer belonging? How does it offer becoming, where you can grow in your faith? But all of it comes down to this. You come here, whether you realize it or not, with a longing. It's easier to stay home. I'm just going to be honest with you. If I weren't a preacher, I'd probably stay home sometimes. It's easier to stay home, isn't it? But you come nonetheless. We owe it to you as a church to meet that longing, whatever it is, and to offer you ways to grow in your faith, to connect you with God, to help you grow in love, to surround you with a community that loves and accepts you just as you are, because that's who Christ made you to be. And then you go from here, as you engage in your faith, and you go be the teacher who makes a decision without even thinking about it. That, a few extra minutes with this one problem student's not that bad after all. Because, I know that deep down I'm called to be a teacher, and I'm going to stand in the gap for this child, because this is not just a job, it's a ministry. Or you go as a healthcare professional, and you say, I'm dealing with patients is really kind of a pain sometimes, but you know what? I'm called to this. That this is not just a job. This is about being the hands and feet and healing touch of God. And I'm going to give maybe a little more today, because this is a ministry. That whatever job you have, an IT professional, real estate agent, whatever it is, you're going to give maybe just a little bit more, because it's not just a job, and it's not just a life, and it's not just a routine. It's about living in the light of God's love. It's about putting Jesus first in your life so that everything else looks maybe a little different. It's about feeling this great longing be met with this great calling that says whatever you are doing in your daily life, even the retired person, you think retired means I don't have to work anymore, but you find so many ways to serve. That whatever you do for the sake of Christ who loves you. Because this is the Christ who calls you to take up a cross, to engage your faith on a daily basis, to love and serve the world around you, even when it's hard, to give your life because He gave His. And the very best life lived is the one given away. This is the journey of discipleship. Amen.